message arrived on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. Captain Taman stood in the command center of Earth Defense Headquarters, watching the holographic display flicker to life. Above him, 3 alien faces materialized in the air. One looked like a giant insect made of blue crystal. Another seemed to be made of smoke and light, constantly shifting. The third was a collection of small creatures moving together as one body. People of Earth. The crystal being spoke, its voice translated into perfect English. "We are the Galactic Council. We come with a request." Taman felt his heart race. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 2 years ago, after Dr. Nari's team successfully created faster-than-light travel. Since then, Earth had been the new kid in a universe full of ancient civilizations. Everyone wanted to prove that humans belonged among the stars. "The galaxy faces a great threat," the crystal being continued. "The Voidborn consume everything in their path. 12 species fight against them, but we are losing. We need your help." Ambassador Minho stepped forward. He was Earth's voice in the Galactic Council, a diplomat who had spent the last 2 years building relationships with alien species. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "The people of Earth are honored by your request," Minho said. "What would you need from us?" "Your ships, your soldiers, your tactical minds," the smoke being replied. "Humans have studied war for thousands of years. You understand strategy and sacrifice. We need that now." Taman watched as Minho's face lit up. This was the moment Earth had been waiting for. A chance to prove they were equals, not just newcomers. A chance to show that humanity mattered in the grand scope of the universe. "We accept," Minho said without hesitation. The crystal being nodded. "Prepare your fleet. We will send coordinates for the staging area. Thank you, humans. The galaxy will remember this." The transmission ended. For a moment, the room was silent. Then someone cheered. Soon, everyone was celebrating. They were going to fight alongside the great civilizations of the galaxy. They were going to be heroes. Only one voice remained quiet. The crystal being, whose name was Counselor Vrex, sent a private message to Minho's personal device an hour later. "Ambassador, please reconsider. There are things about warfare you do not understand. Things about your species that make this dangerous." Minho deleted the message. He thought it was prejudice, another alien who didn't believe humans could handle themselves. He was wrong, but he wouldn't realize that until it was too late. The next 3 weeks were chaos. Earth's military mobilized faster than ever before. 50 warships were prepared, their crews carefully selected from the best soldiers Earth had to offer. Each ship carried 300 people, along with weapons, supplies, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Taman was chosen to lead the fleet. At 38 years old, he was one of the youngest captains in Earth's history, but he had never lost a battle simulation. His tactical mind was legendary. If anyone could lead humanity to victory among the stars, it was him. Dr. Nari would join them too. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she would study the enemy, find weaknesses, and develop strategies to exploit them. She was brilliant, dedicated, and fearless. She had spent 2 years studying alien life forms, learning how different species thought and fought. "Are you ready for this?" Nari asked Taman the night before departure. They stood on the observation deck, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. "I've trained my whole life for combat," Taman replied. "This is just a bigger battlefield." "But we've never fought aliens before," Nari said quietly. "We don't know what we're getting into." "That's why you're coming with us," Taman smiled. "You'll figure it out. You always do." The day of departure arrived. The 50 warships gathered in orbit, their silver hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Millions of people watched from Earth, pride swelling in their hearts. Humanity was joining the galactic community not as observers, but as protectors, as warriors. Taman addressed his crew from the bridge of the flagship, a massive vessel called the Horizon. His words were broadcast to all 50 ships, to every soldier who would fight beside him. "Today we make history," he said. "Today we show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. We've been told we're too young, too inexperienced, too emotional. Today we prove them wrong. We fight for Earth, for our families, and for every species threatened by the Voidborn. We fight for the galaxy itself." The crew cheered. Young Lieutenant Jiho, barely 25 years old, stood at the weapons console with tears in his eyes. Commander Yuna, Taman's second-in-command, checked and rechecked every system to make sure they were ready. Everyone believed they were about to become legends. The engines roared to life. One by one, The 50 ships activated their faster-than-light drives and disappeared into the void. The journey to the war zone would take 3 days. 3 days of anticipation, preparation, and excitement. On Earth, Ambassador Minho watched them go. He felt pride, certainly, but also a small seed of doubt. Counselor Vrex's warning echoed in his mind, but he pushed it away. Humans had conquered their own planet, built civilizations, survived wars and disasters. Surely they could handle this. In her lab aboard the Horizon, Dr. Nari studied reports from the war zone. She read about the Voidborn, about how they consumed entire planets, leaving nothing behind. She read about the 12 species fighting them, about battles that lasted weeks, about millions of casualties. Something bothered her about the reports. The alien species described death and destruction in cold, precise language. There was no emotion, no horror, no grief, just facts and numbers. She wondered why that was, but she didn't have enough information yet. Lieutenant Jiho couldn't sleep that first night. He lay in his bunk, imagining the battles to come. He pictured himself as a hero, saving lives and defeating enemies. He was so young, so eager, so completely unprepared for what war really meant. Commander Yuna did sleep, but her dreams were troubled. She saw fire and darkness, heard screaming that made no sense. When she woke, she couldn't remember the details, only a feeling of deep unease. Captain Taman stood on the bridge, watching stars streak past as they traveled faster than light. He felt confident, ready, certain of success. He had no idea that in a few months he would be begging the Galactic Council to let his people go home. He had no idea that humanity was about to learn a terrible truth about themselves. The fleet raced toward war, carrying 15,000 human souls who believed they were ready for anything. They were wrong. The staging area was nothing like Taman expected. He stood on the bridge of the Horizon, staring at the massive collection of alien warships floating in space. There were hundreds of them, each one stranger than the last. Some looked like living creatures made of metal. Others were geometric shapes that hurt to look at. A few seemed to exist in more dimensions than his eyes could process. "Captain, we're receiving docking coordinates," Commander Yuna said. Her voice was steady, but Taman could hear the nervousness underneath. This was real now. They were really here. The human fleet moved into position, 50 small ships among hundreds of massive alien vessels. Taman felt suddenly very small. An alien delegation came aboard the Horizon an hour later. The crystal being, one of the lumens, moved with precise mechanical grace. Behind it floated an Etherian, the smoke being that seemed to be made of colored gas. 3 collective drones scuttled along, moving in perfect synchronization. "Welcome, humans," the lumen said. Its voice had no emotion, just information. "We will conduct tactical briefings and training exercises before combat deployment. Follow us." The briefing room was designed for multiple species with different atmosphere zones and gravity settings. Taman, Yuna, and several other human officers gathered in the Earth Standard section. Dr. Nari took careful notes on everything she observed. "The Voidborn attack in waves," the lumen explained, projecting holographic images. "They convert matter into more Voidborn. Every ship they destroy becomes fuel for their expansion. Every planet they consume births a million more of them." The images showed horrifying scenes. Planets being stripped of all life, their surfaces turning black. Ships exploding and reforming as Voidborn vessels. Entire solar systems going dark. Lieutenant Jiho felt his stomach turn, but he forced himself to watch. This was the enemy. This was what they came to fight. "Current casualty rates are acceptable," the Etherian said, its voice like wind through caves. "We lose approximately 10,000 soldiers per engagement. Production rates compensate for losses." Taman blinked. 10,000 deaths were acceptable? He looked at Yuna, who had gone pale. That was more casualties than most of Earth's wars combined. "How do you define acceptable?" Dr. Nari asked carefully. "The war continues," the lumen replied. "That is the definition of acceptable. If losses exceeded reproduction rates, the war would end. They do not. Therefore acceptable." The humans exchanged glances. Something felt wrong about that logic, but they couldn't quite identify what. The training simulations began the next day. Human ships flew alongside alien vessels, practicing formations and tactics. The technology was incredible. Targeting systems that predicted enemy movements. Shields that absorbed impossible amounts of damage. Weapons that could crack a moon in half. The first simulation was a rescue operation. A mining colony was under attack, and the fleet needed to evacuate civilians while holding off voidborn forces. Taman commanded the operation brilliantly. He split his forces, using half to engage the enemy while the other half focused on evacuation. The human ships moved with precision, covering each other, creating safe corridors for the transport vessels. When the simulation ended, the results flashed across every screen. Mission success. 0 friendly casualties. All civilians evacuated. Perfect score. The alien commanders expressed approval in their emotionless way. Humans demonstrate tactical aptitude, one said. Combat readiness confirmed. The human crews celebrated. They had proven themselves. They could do this, but the real battle would be different. 3 days later, the call came. A mining colony in the breach system was under attack. This wasn't a simulation. The Voidborn had arrived and people were dying. All ships prepare for combat, Taman ordered. His heart pounded, but his voice remained calm. This was what they trained for. This was why they came. The human fleet jumped into the breach system alongside 50 alien vessels. The scene that greeted them was chaos. The mining colony orbited a red dwarf star, a cluster of habitats connected by transit tubes. Voidborn ships swarmed around it like insects, their dark hulls absorbing light. They were already tearing into the outer habitats, converting metal and flesh into more of themselves. All ships engage, the alien fleet commander ordered. Priority, destroy Voidborn vessels. Secondary, prevent colony consumption. The battle began. Human ships opened fire, their weapons blazing across the void. The Voidborn were fast, but Taman's tactical predictions were faster. He positioned his ships to create crossfire zones, trapping enemy vessels and destroying them efficiently. Lieutenant Jiho worked his weapons console with fierce concentration. Every shot counted. Every kill was one less threat to the colony. He felt alive in a way he never had before. Commander Yuna coordinated the fleet's movements, her brilliant mind processing dozens of variables at once. She saw patterns in the chaos, found weaknesses in the enemy formation. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it ended, 70% of the Voidborn forces were destroyed. The remaining ships retreated. The colony was saved. Victory achieved, the alien fleet commander announced. Acceptable losses. Humans performed adequately. The human crews cheered. They had done it. Their first real battle, and they had won. But then came the casualty reports. 8 habitats had been breached before the Voidborn were stopped. 3,000 civilians were dead. Another 500 were missing, presumed consumed. Dozens of life pods drifted in space, their occupants frozen or suffocated. Taman stared at the numbers on his screen. 3,000 people. Dead. They had won, but 3,000 people were still dead. Captain, should we begin recovery operations? Yuna asked. Her voice sounded strange, hollow. Recovery of what? The alien commander asked. The battle is concluded. We move to the next objective. The bodies, Taman said slowly. The survivors in the life pods. We need to recover them. Life signs in the pods are negative, the Lumen stated. Recovery is inefficient. We proceed to next engagement. But their families, Lieutenant Jiho said, his voice cracking. They need to know. They need to bring them home. Information will be transmitted to relevant parties, the Etherian replied. Your concern is not logical. They are deceased. Their matter will be reclaimed by natural processes. The human officers stared in stunned silence. The aliens were already moving away, already planning the next battle. They showed no grief, no sorrow, no horror at what had happened. Dr. Nari watched the alien commanders through the observation window. They discussed the battle with the same tone one might use to describe a mathematics problem. Calculating, analytical, empty. That night, the human ships were quiet. The celebration had died. Instead, crew members sat in mess halls staring at nothing. Some cried. Others just looked lost. Lieutenant Jiho couldn't eat. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the habitats tearing apart. He saw bodies floating in space. He had killed Voidborn ships, yes, but 3,000 people were still dead. Had he been fast enough? Could he have saved more? Commander Yuna locked herself in her quarters. She had run the numbers 100 times. If she had positioned the fleet differently, maybe 2 habitats could have been saved. Maybe 500 more people would be alive. The mathematics of death consumed her thoughts. Captain Taman walked through the ship, checking on his crew. He found them in various states of shock. Some were functional, others were breaking down. All of them looked haunted. "Captain," one young ensign said, tears streaming down her face. "Why don't they care? Why don't the aliens care that people died?" Taman had no answer. In her lab, Dr. Nari reviewed footage of the alien crews during battle. She watched them work with perfect efficiency, showing no stress, no fear, no reaction to death and destruction. They fought like machines, processed casualties like data. And then she realized something that made her blood run cold. The aliens weren't being cold or cruel. They genuinely didn't feel anything. Death meant nothing to them beyond tactical considerations. They had no empathy, no emotional connection to the lives lost, but humans did. Humans felt everything. She pulled up psychological profiles of the crew. Already 40 people were showing signs of acute stress. The ship's counselors were overwhelmed with requests. And this was just one battle. Dr. Nari sat back, her hands trembling. They had won the battle, but something was very, very wrong. Humans weren't built for this kind of warfare. Not the tactics or the weapons, but the cost. The emotional cost that the aliens didn't even notice. She wrote a report and sent it to Captain Taman. But she had no solutions, no answers. Just a growing sense of horror about what was coming. 3 months. That was all it took for everything to fall apart. Captain Taman sat in his ready room, reading reports that made his heart sink. The numbers were damning. Human combat effectiveness had dropped from 95% to 37%. Response times were slower. Tactical decisions were hesitant. Mistakes were becoming common. But worse than the performance numbers were the medical reports. Psychologist Hyun had sent her weekly summary, and it read like a horror story. Out of 15,000 human soldiers across the fleet, 6,000 were showing symptoms of severe psychological trauma. Another 4,000 had moderate symptoms. The remaining 5,000 were holding on, but barely. The medical ship Solace, which was supposed to handle routine injuries, had become a floating psychiatric hospital. Every bed was full. Counselors worked 18-hour shifts and still couldn't keep up with the demand. Taman rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night in weeks. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the battles, saw the death, saw the faces of his crew members as they slowly broke down. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said. Dr. Nari entered, carrying a data pad and looking exhausted. She had lost weight, Taman noticed. They all had. Stress ate away at them in ways the aliens couldn't understand. "I have the analysis you requested," she said, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "You're not going to like it." "I haven't liked anything in 3 months," Taman replied. "Tell me." Nari pulled up a holographic display between them. It showed comparative data between human and alien forces. "I've been studying the other species," she said, "trying to understand why they can fight without breaking down. I found the answer, and it's not what I expected." She gestured to the display, showing brain scans of different species. Every alien species in this war evolved from fundamentally different origins than humans. The lumens evolved from crystal formations that networked information. They don't have individual consciousness the way we do. The Etherians are energy beings that exist as collective fields. The collective is literally a hive mind. "What does that mean for us?" Taman asked. "It means they don't feel empathy," Nari said quietly. "Not the way humans do. They can't. When a lumen sees another lumen die, it processes that as data loss. When an Etherian witnesses destruction, it experiences it as energy redistribution. They don't have mirror neurons. They don't feel what others feel." Taman stared at the brain scans. "But humans do. Humans evolved from social primates," Nari continued. "We survived because we could work together, because we could understand what others were feeling. We developed empathy as a survival trait. When we see someone in pain, our brains literally mirror that pain. When we see death, we feel it as if it's happening to us. That's why we're falling apart," Taman said, understanding dawning. "Exactly," Nari nodded. "Every battle we fight, every casualty we witness, our brains process it as personal trauma. The aliens see numbers. We see people. They calculate losses. We grieve them." A message flashed on Taman's console. New orders. Another battle. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "We have to fight again," he said. "Space station defense in the outer rim. Void-born fleet approaching." "Taman." Nari said gently. I don't think we can. I don't think humans are capable of sustained warfare. Not like this. We don't have a choice, Taman replied, standing up. People are about to die. We can't just abandon them. That was the trap, Nari realized. Humans couldn't stop fighting because their empathy wouldn't let them. They couldn't walk away from people who needed help. It was the same trait that was destroying them. The fleet mobilized for the new battle. But this time something was different. The crews moved slowly, mechanically. There was no excitement, no eagerness. Just dread. Lieutenant Jiho stood at his weapons console, his hands shaking. He had stopped sleeping a month ago. Every night he saw the people he couldn't save. Every day he wondered if he was fast enough, good enough, if one more shot could have made a difference. Jiho, Commander Yuna said quietly. Are you ready? He nodded, not trusting his voice. But Yuna could see the truth. He wasn't ready. None of them were. Yuna herself was barely holding together. She had been relieved of duty twice already for breakdowns during combat. Each time she had begged to return. Not because she wanted to fight, but because she couldn't stand the thought of her friends dying while she was safe. The space station came into view. It was beautiful. A massive structure that housed 50,000 people from a dozen different species. Gardens visible through the transparent sections. Ships coming and going. Life happening in the black void of space. Then the Voidborn arrived. They came in a wave, hundreds of dark ships moving like a swarm. The station's defenses opened fire, but there were too many. The alien fleet engaged, their tactics perfect and emotionless. The human ships moved into position. All ships weapons free, Taman ordered. Protect the station, the battle was chaos. Voidborn ships were everywhere, their weapons tearing into the station's shields. The alien fleet fought with cold precision, destroying enemies with mechanical efficiency. But the humans were different. They saw the station, saw the gardens and the ships and the people, and they felt everything. Every hit the station took was a knife to their hearts. Every explosion was personal. Section 7 is breached, a voice reported over the comm. 1,000 casualties confirmed. Voidborn are entering the station. Lieutenant Jiho heard that and something inside him snapped. 1,000 people. Dead. And they were still fighting out here, still shooting at ships in space while people inside were dying. I'm going in, he said, breaking formation. Jiho, negative, Yuna shouted. Stay in position. But he didn't listen. His ship dove toward the station, weapons blazing, trying to stop the Voidborn that were boarding. He didn't think about tactics or orders or the bigger picture. He only thought about the people inside who needed help. 2 other human ships followed him. Their captains made the same choice, abandoning their positions to attempt rescue operations. Get back here, Taman ordered, his voice desperate. That's an order. They didn't respond. One ship managed to dock with the station, its crew rushing inside to evacuate survivors. The second ship was hit by Voidborn fire and exploded. 300 people gone in an instant. The third ship was crippled, drifting, powerless. And while the humans broke formation to save lives, the Voidborn exploited the gap. They punched through the defensive line and tore into the station's core. Core breach detected. The emotionless voice of the alien fleet commander announced, "Station destruction imminent." "All forces retreat." "No," Taman shouted. "We can still save people." "Negative," the commander replied. "Tactical situation untenable. Retreat is mandatory." The station exploded. 50,000 lives ended in a flash of light and fire. The human fleet watched, frozen in horror. Some crews screamed. Others went silent. Lieutenant Jiho, still alive in his damaged ship, simply shut down. His mind couldn't process what had just happened. The alien fleet had already moved on, calculating the next objective. But the human ships drifted in space, their crews unable to function. On the bridge of the horizon, Commander Yuna collapsed. She curled into a ball, sobbing uncontrollably. Taman wanted to help her, but he couldn't move. He stared at the empty space where the station had been, where 50,000 people had been alive just minutes ago. "This is Captain Taman of Earth Fleet," he said, his voice hollow. "I am formally requesting immediate withdrawal from the combat zone. My forces are no longer combat effective. Explanation required," the alien commander responded. "We're dying," Taman said simply. "Not our bodies, our minds, our souls. We can't do this anymore." In her lab, Dr. Nari received Taman's transmission. She had been expecting this. 3 months of watching her people break down had led to this inevitable moment. She pulled up casualty statistics. 15,000 humans had come to war. 300 were physically dead. But 6,000 were mentally destroyed, their minds shattered by trauma. Another 5,000 were severely damaged. Only a handful remained functional, and they were hanging on by pure willpower. Psychologist Hayen sat in the medical bay, surrounded by soldiers who couldn't stop crying. Young Ensign Doyen, who used to be the best pilot in the fleet, couldn't even look at a cockpit anymore without having panic attacks. Commander Yuna was sedated, her mind temporarily broken by grief. The aliens didn't understand. They received Taemin's request and processed it as a malfunction. Humans were simply defective soldiers. The mission continued without them, but Taemin understood now. Humans weren't defective. They were fundamentally different. They were built to feel, to care, to connect. Those traits made them incredible diplomats, artists, teachers, friends. But those same traits made them terrible at war. He sent a message to Ambassador Minho on Earth. It was simple and devastating. We're coming home. We're broken. And we're never fighting again. Ambassador Minho stood in the halls of the Galactic Council, feeling smaller than he ever had in his life. The message from Captain Taemin played in his mind on repeat. Broken. That's what his people had become. 3 months of warfare had done what centuries of Earth's history had never accomplished. It had broken humanity's spirit completely. The council chambers were enormous, designed to accommodate hundreds of different species. Minho walked through corridors that shifted between different gravities and atmospheres, past beings that looked like nightmares or dreams or mathematical equations given form. He had requested an emergency meeting with Counselor Vrex, the crystal being who had warned him not to send humans to war. The same warning Minho had ignored, confident in humanity's strength. Ambassador Minho, Vrex's voice chimed like bells. The lumen stood in a garden filled with crystalline plants that grew in geometric patterns. I received your request. I assume this is about Earth's withdrawal from the war. You knew this would happen, Minho said, trying to keep the anger from his voice. You warned me and I didn't listen. But you knew. Tell me why. Vrex was silent for a long moment, light refracting through its crystalline body. Follow me, it finally said. There is something you need to see. They walked through corridors Minho had never visited, deeper into the council archives. The passages here were old, carved from stone that predated many civilizations. Finally, they reached a sealed door marked with symbols Minho couldn't read. These are the classified archives, Vrex explained, reserved for the council's darkest secrets. What I am about to show you could end my career, Ambassador, but you deserve to know the truth. The door opened. Inside was a chamber filled with holographic records, millions of them, stretching back thousands of years. Vrex pulled up specific files and displayed them in the air between them. 800 years ago, Vrex began, the council discovered a species called the Kyrosians. They were remarkably similar to humans, social creatures who evolved from pack hunters. They had families, art, music, emotions. They could feel what others felt. Minho stared at the images. The Kyrosians looked nothing like humans physically, but their cities, their culture, their way of life all felt familiar. He saw children playing, couples holding hands, communities gathering together. They were invited to join a war, Vrex continued. Different enemy, same situation. The council needed soldiers, and the Kyrosians were eager to prove themselves. The next images made Minho's stomach turn. They showed Kyrosian soldiers in various states of collapse. Some stared blankly at nothing. Others screamed silently. Many were being physically restrained as they tried to harm themselves. Within 4 months, 60% of their military forces were psychologically destroyed, Vrex said quietly. They couldn't process the death and violence. Every battle broke them a little more. By month 6, their entire military collapsed. Their society was traumatized. They withdrew from the galactic community and have remained isolated for 8 centuries. Why didn't you tell us? Minho asked, his voice shaking. Why didn't anyone warn Earth about this? We did, Vrex replied. I personally sent you a message. But there was disagreement within the council. Some believed humans were different from the Kyrosians. Your species has a more violent history. You fought wars for thousands of years. Some thought that meant you could handle galactic warfare. They were testing us, Minho said, understanding dawning. We were an experiment. Not all of us agreed with that decision, Vrex said. But the council operates by consensus. The majority voted to invite humanity, to see if you were truly like the Kyrosians or if your violent history had made you different. Minho felt sick. 15,000 people had been sent to war, their minds destroyed, all because the council wanted to test a theory. "Show me more," he demanded. "Show me everything." Vrex pulled up additional files. Minho read about 14 other species scattered across the galaxy, all of them possessing deep empathy, all of them unable to participate in warfare. The council had a classification for them, written in clinical language that made Minho's blood boil. "Sentience of burden," he read aloud. "Species whose emotional capacity exceeds their tactical utility. Not recommended for military operations." "It's not meant as an insult," Vrex explained. "The galaxy needs different species for different roles. The empathetic species serve other functions. They are counselors, mediators, artists, teachers. They build bridges between cultures. They remind the rest of us why we fight." "But they can't fight themselves," Minho said bitterly. "No," Vrex agreed, "because fighting requires a certain emotional distance that empathetic species cannot achieve. When my kind sees a casualty, we process it as information. When your kind sees a casualty, you experience it as personal loss. That's not a weakness, Ambassador. It's a different kind of strength. But it's not compatible with warfare." Minho paced the chamber, his mind racing. Back on Earth, preparations were being made to receive the returning fleet. Medical facilities were being prepared, counselors trained, whole hospitals dedicated to treating psychological trauma on a scale humanity had never seen. "What happens now?" he asked. "Earth's fleet is withdrawing. We're leaving the war. Will the council punish us for that?" "No," Vrex said. "In fact, the withdrawal has already been approved by unanimous vote. We're letting your people go home, Ambassador. We should never have sent them in the first place." Something in Vrex's tone made Minho pause. "What aren't you telling me?" "There's an attack coming," Vrex said quietly. "A major void-born offensive targeting the sanctuary worlds. 3 planets, each holding over 1 billion civilians from various species. The attack will begin in 48 hours. "And you want Earth's fleet to help defend them?" Minho said, feeling fury rise in his chest. "After everything you've put my people through, you want them to fight again?" "No," Vrex said. "I want them to leave before it starts. I don't want any more humans to be broken by this war." But even as Vrex spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the council station. Minho's communicator lit up with emergency messages. The Voidborn attack hadn't waited 48 hours. It was happening now. "The sanctuary worlds are under attack," a voice announced over the station's speakers. "All available forces respond immediately. Civilian evacuation is underway. Current population at risk, 3.2 billion souls." Minho looked at Vrex. "My people are supposed to be leaving." "Yes," Vrex replied. 3 billion civilians are about to die. The Allied fleet will do everything possible to defend them," Vrex said. "But yes, casualties will be substantial." Minho thought about Captain Taman, broken and exhausted. He thought about Commander Yuna, sedated in the medical bay. He thought about Lieutenant Jiho, who couldn't even sit in a cockpit anymore. He thought about the 6,000 soldiers with shattered minds, the 300 dead, the thousands more damaged beyond repair, and then he thought about 3 billion people who had no one else to save them. "I need to speak with Captain Taman," Minho said. "Open a communication channel." "Ambassador," Vrex said carefully. "Your people are not required to help. No one will think less of Earth if you leave now." "Open the channel," Minho repeated. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Taman's face. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 months ago. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt. Behind him, the bridge of the horizon was quiet, the crew moving like ghosts. "Ambassador," Taman said, "we're preparing to jump home. Another few hours and we'll be ready." "Taman," Minho said gently, "there's a situation. The sanctuary worlds are under attack. 3 billion civilians. The Allied fleet is responding, but they're asking if Earth can help." Taman closed his eyes. For a long moment, he didn't speak. When he opened them again, something had changed in his expression. "No," he said simply. "We can't fight anymore. We're done." "I understand," Minho said. "And I'm not asking you to fight." Taman looked confused. "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking if you can save lives instead," Minho said. "Not fighting. Just evacuation, rescue operations. Getting people out while the others hold the line." That's all. Taman looked at his crew. He saw Yuna, who had insisted on returning to the bridge despite her condition. He saw Jiho, who was shaking but present. He saw the hundreds of broken people who had come here to be heroes and found only horror. And then he thought about 3 billion people who just needed someone to help them survive. "Let me talk to my crew," Taman said. "I'll call you back." The channel closed. Vrex looked at Minho. "That was cruel, Ambassador. Asking broken people to go back into danger." "I'm not asking them to fight," Minho said. "I'm asking them to do what they do best. To care when no one else does. To see lives worth saving when everyone else sees numbers. And if it breaks them further, then at least they'll break while saving people instead of killing them," Minho replied. "Maybe that will make a difference." 30 minutes later, Taman's response came through. "We're going to the sanctuary worlds," he said. "Not to fight. But we can't leave 3 billion people to die. We'll do what we can." And for the first time in weeks, Minho saw something in Taman's eyes that hadn't been there before. Not hope, exactly, but purpose. A reason to keep going that wasn't about destroying enemies. It was about saving friends they had never met. The sanctuary worlds were burning. Captain Taman watched from the bridge of the horizon as his fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. 3 planets hung in space, each one surrounded by swarms of void-borne ships. Defense stations were exploding. Orbital habitats were being torn apart. And everywhere, there were escape pods and civilian transports trying desperately to flee. "How many people?" Taman asked quietly. 3.2 billion on the planets," Commander Yuna replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. "Another 200 million in orbital stations. Evacuation has been underway for 30 minutes, but the civilian transport capacity is insufficient. Current projection shows 80% casualty rate. 80%. That meant 2.7 billion people would die unless someone helped them." "All ships?" Taman said into the fleet-wide channel. "This is your captain. I won't lie to you. What we're about to do is dangerous. Some of us might not make it home, but we're not here to fight. We're here to save lives. That's all. Every person we evacuate is a victory. Every child we get to safety is worth more than any battle we could win." He paused, looking at his crew. Jiho stood at his station, tears streaming down his face, but his hands were steady on the controls. Yuna had refused sedation, had demanded to be here. Around the ship, thousands of broken soldiers prepared themselves not for combat, but for something they understood better. Rescue. We see what others don't. Taman continued. We feel what others can't. The galaxy says we're too emotional for war. They're right. But that same emotion is what makes us perfect for this. We're going to save as many people as we can. Not because we were ordered to. Not because it's tactically sound. But because it's right. Because every life matters. That's what makes us human. The human fleet split into teams, each one assigned to different evacuation zones. The alien warships moved to engage the Voidborn, their weapons blazing with cold precision. But the human ships dove toward the planets, toward the desperate civilians, toward life instead of death. Lieutenant Jiho guided his ship through debris fields and weapon fire, his entire focus on the transport vessels struggling to escape. He saw families crowded into cargo ships, saw children pressed against windows, saw the fear in their alien faces. This is Earth Vessel Phoenix, he transmitted. We're here to help. All civilian craft follow my trajectory. We'll clear a path. His ship's weapons fired, but not at Voidborn vessels. Instead, he targeted debris, clearing safe corridors for the evacuation. Other human ships followed his lead, creating highways through the chaos. On the surface of the first planet, hundreds of evacuation sites were overwhelmed. Not enough ships, not enough time. Panic was spreading. People were being trampled in the rush to escape. Dr. Nari coordinated with other human medical personnel, establishing triage protocols. We can't save everyone, she said, her voice breaking. But we can organize this. We can make sure the most vulnerable get out first. Children, elderly, injured. That's the priority. Human ground teams deployed not as soldiers but as coordinators. They moved through the crowds, speaking in gentle voices, organizing chaos into order. They held scared children, reassured panicking families, carried those who couldn't walk, and they felt everything. Every terrified face, every desperate plea, every moment of fear. It hurt. It hurt in ways the battles never had. But this pain had purpose. Jiho, Commander Yuna's voice came through his communicator. We have a transport with failing engines. 3,000 people on board, mostly children from a school evacuation. They can't make it out of the gravity well. On my way, Jiho replied immediately. He found the transport struggling to climb away from the planet's surface, its engines sputtering. 3,000 kids. He thought about the children he couldn't save in previous battles, the faces that haunted his dreams. Not this time. Phoenix to transport vessel, he said. I'm going to use my tractor beam to assist your climb. Hold steady. He maneuvered his ship below the transport, engaged the tractor beam, and pushed his engines to maximum. The strain was enormous, but he didn't care. Inside that transport were 3,000 reasons to keep going. The transport made it to orbit. The children were saved. Across the three worlds, similar stories played out thousands of times. Human ships pushed beyond their safety limits to evacuate civilians. Human crews worked without rest, organizing, rescuing, saving. They didn't have the firepower to fight the Voidborn. But they had something the aliens didn't. They had the ability to see each person as an individual worth saving. They had the empathy to prioritize the scared and the weak. They had the compassion to risk their own lives for strangers. Admiral Kyung-soo, the overall commander of Earth's fleet, coordinated the largest evacuation operation in galactic history. He worked with Dr. Nari to identify bottlenecks and solve problems. He worked with psychologist Haeun to keep his crews functional despite their exhaustion. We've evacuated 400 million so far, Kyung-soo reported after 6 hours. But we're running out of time. The Voidborn are breaking through the defensive line. Then we work faster, Taemin replied. He was everywhere at once, coordinating rescue operations, encouraging his crews, finding solutions to impossible problems. The alien fleet held the line with mechanical precision, buying time with their lives. But even they began to notice something strange. The human ships weren't fighting, but the evacuation rate had tripled. Civilian casualties were dropping dramatically. The humans were performing miracles. On the second planet, a collective drone cluster approached Commander Yuna. Explain your methods, it requested. Human evacuation efficiency exceeds projections by 300%. Yuna looked at the drone, thinking about how to explain empathy to a hive mind. We see them as people, she said simply. Not numbers. Not data points, people. When you care about each individual, you find ways to save them. The drone processed this. Inefficient but effective. Continue operations. Psychologist Haeun worked on the medical ship Solace, now converted into a refugee processing center. She helped traumatized civilians, many of whom had lost family members. She held crying children who didn't speak any Earth language. She used her own pain, her own understanding of trauma to help others heal. I know you're scared, she told a small alien child through a translator. I'm scared too, but we're safe now. We're going to be okay. The child clung to her, and Haeun felt her heart break and heal at the same time. This was what her empathy was for. Not to break her in battle, but to heal others in crisis. The evacuation continued for 12 hours. The human crews operated beyond exhaustion, running on pure willpower and purpose. They saved children from collapsing buildings. They rescued elderly aliens from failing life support systems. They carried the injured, organized the panicked, protected the vulnerable, and they lost ships. 7 human vessels were destroyed during evacuation operations. Not by Voidborn weapons, but by accidents. Ships that pushed their engines too hard. Captains who got too close to collapsing structures. Crews that refused to leave until every last civilian was safe. 2,000 humans died saving others, but they saved 4.2 billion civilians. When the last transport cleared the evacuation zone, when the Voidborn finally consumed the 3 planets, the human fleet gathered at the rally point. They were battered, exhausted, traumatized, but they had done something impossible. Final count, Admiral Kyung-soo announced. 4.2 billion civilians evacuated. Casualty rate reduced from projected 80% to 12%. 2,000 human casualties. 7 ships lost, the numbers hung in the air. In 12 hours, humanity had saved billions of lives. A transmission came through from the Galactic Council. But it wasn't Counselor Vrex. It was a species Taemin had never seen before. Beings that looked almost like humans, but with subtle differences. They were beautiful and sad at the same time. This is the Kyrosian Observer, the being said. We have watched from afar for 800 years, too afraid to join the galaxy again after what war did to us. We watched humanity repeat our mistakes. Saw your people break the way we broke. We thought you would isolate yourselves like we did. The observer's expression shifted to something like pride. But you found a different path. You transformed your weakness into strength. You used your empathy not for war but for mercy. You reminded us that there is no shame in being unable to kill without cost. The shame would be in never learning to save another channel opened. Then another. 14 different species, all of them empathetic, all of them unable to fight, all of them watching humanity with something like hope. You did what we could not, one said. You found your purpose. Counselor Vrex contacted Taman directly. Captain, the Council wishes to make a formal proposal. We want to establish the Galactic Rescue Corps, a permanent organization dedicated to civilian protection and disaster relief. We want humanity to lead it. Why us? Taman asked, though he already knew the answer. Because you care when no one else does, Vrex replied. Because you see value in every life. Because you're willing to risk everything to save strangers. That's not a weakness, Captain. That's the most important strength in the galaxy. Ambassador Minho added his voice to the conversation. The Council is offering Earth a full seat, equal status, and the resources to build this corps.